Hey everyone, it's David from Lightning Boy Studio, and today's video will be all about the Lightning Boy Shader 2.0. It's a huge new release we've just made available on our Gumroad page, and I'm gonna give you an overview of all the features and what you can expect to do with it. But first, let's watch the trailer. All right, I hope this got you excited. So the reason we're selling this shader today is basically because we're raising money for our project, Dinomancers. We want to make it into an animated show. It's been our dream for many years now. And while we developed this new Toon shader for ourselves initially, after pouring so many months of work into it, we thought maybe you'd like to have access to it for your own projects. We're super grateful for all the positive feedback we've been getting on our channel this past year, and if you decide to support us today, it will really help us continue making more free content for everyone on YouTube. I want to keep pushing Blender as the leading platform for non-photorealistic work in the years to come, and that's why we want to donate 10% of the money raised to Blender NPR, and specifically to help them fund their project called EEVEE. EEVEE stands for Blender Extended Expressive Renderer. It's a fantastic initiative by Light BW UK, a very important member of the Blender NPR community, and it shares many ideas with our Toon shader. It's a very feature-centric system, and while our shader works with EEVEE and is kind of restricted by that framework, the cool thing about this renderer is it's being written from the ground up, so it's going to be possible to do anything with it, and it's going to be an incredible asset for everyone once it's going to be released. They're already at 75% funded, so I think together we could do it. All right, well, without further ado, I'm going to dive in and show you what this Lightning Boy Shader 2.0 is all about and how to use it. All right, so I've opened up the Lightning Boy Shader 2.0 blend file. This is exactly the scene you're going to get if you buy it on Gumroad. Now, if you followed our Toon Shader tutorial series over the past year, you'll notice that many of these features will sound familiar, such as Occlusion and Matcap. However, this shader is totally new. It's much more powerful and customizable. In fact, there are so many new options that there's just no way we're going to be able to cover everything in just this video, which is why we made a detailed user guide. It's a 20+ page PDF document you get to download when you get the scene. And it's going to teach you everything you need to know to get the shader up and running with easy step-by-step instructions and illustrations. And it's going to teach you about all the features and the properties. So if you have any questions whatsoever about how to use the shader, refer to the user guide. It's very complete. Now, one thing I should mention right off the bat is that we really need to be using Blender 2.91 for your shader to work. If you're still using 2.9 or an older version, you need to upgrade because this shader won't be supported. So when you open this scene, you'll see that all you have to do really is change the viewport shading to rendered to be greeted with this fully functioning Toon shaded environment. The goal here was really to speed up your creative process and to avoid spending hours making new Toon shaders from scratch all the time. So you can import the shader in an existing scene. However, you're going to have to change a few settings. For example, in the color management, going to have to change the world material. So you can do it. All the steps are in the user guide, but it's much easier if you just work from the scene. So let me click on this sphere. I'm going to zoom in on the Lightning Boy shader for a moment here. So you see this big box. This is the Lightning Boy shader. This is where the magic happens. And those smaller boxes here are called features. They're sort of standalone little shading modules, and you're going to plug them in these numbered sockets here, which act as layers. So if you've used Photoshop or Substance Painter or really any app that uses layers, these function exactly as you would expect. So if you unplug something, it's going to make it disappear. You can appear back up by connecting it, can change the number of layers on your shader by clicking on the checkered sphere here and changing the number of layers. It seems to go only up to 9, but you can actually use your keyboard arrows to go up to 12. If you inadvertently choose a lower number, the number of layers you already had connected is going to unconnect it. Just have to choose a higher number and connect it again. If you want to swap layers, you can pick this line and place it over the other one. It's going to swap them. Or if you have the node wrangler enabled in your add-on preferences, you can pick the 2 nodes and press Alt-S, and it's going to switch the 2 of them. So let's import an object in our scene. I'm going to show you how to apply a material to it. So I'm going to go File, Append, and select a dinosaur skull. So all of this information here is going to be enclosed in this material you have on the right. So if you plug different features, your material is going to look different. If I wanted to apply the same material to my object, I just have to pick this one and then go to the material panel here and click LBS material. So now they share the same material. So you see these features here. You're also going to find them on the material panel on the right. So you see specular, key light, color, they correspond to the same thing. And if you open them up, you're going to have some extra options. So for example, if I had nothing in the first layer, the base color would be black, but because I placed one color here, I can change the underlying color. And if I open key light, I can play with the softest to make something more cel shaded. If I wanted my skull to have a different material, what I can do is click on this little number next to the material name. It's going to make a copy. I could rename it something else. And if I play with some setting, it's going to affect just this material. I'm going to select back the LBS material. So you'll notice that the sphere has a black outline and the skull doesn't. That's because the outline is not being generated by the shader, but rather through the Solidify modifier in the modifier panel. This is a common method to generate outlines in Blender. It involves making a duplicate hole, inverting the normals, and using backface culling, so you only see the parts of the mesh that stick out, and you can apply a different material to it. This is the method we recommend using if you want to use outline on your models using the shader, and we included an easy preset for you to apply the outline to any object. So to do it, what you want to do, so I'm going to move this dinosaur skull out of the line of shader, and you'll see there's something called Solidify Outline. So you just click on it, press Shift D, it's going to duplicate it, and it's going to want to move it, so just press Escape or right click, and you can move it out of the Lightning Boy shader collection. Now all you have to do is select your object first, the outline second using Control, and then press Control J. So it's going to join the two together. It's going to automatically apply a Solidify modifier to it, so you can already play with the thickness, easy as that, and you have a new Solidify outline, a material in your material panel to change the color if you want to. So, whoops, I just undid that. All right, so let's look at the LBS library here. So what you see here, this is the big library you see when you first open the scene. These are all the nodes that were custom built to work with this shader. And you'll notice that they have some colored sockets. So yellow is for color, gray is for value information, usually used as masks, or for alpha channels. And the green ones are the one you really want to watch out for, because you might be tempted to think they are the same as what you find on BSDF shaders. So you see these are green. And this is how it works usually in Blender. However, for this shader, we're using these green sockets in particular for layer information. So if you want to plug anything in a green socket like you see here in the Lightning Boy shader, you really need to be using the nodes that come from this library for it to work. If you try to plug a BSDF material inside the Lightning Boy shader, it won't work. So most of these features are just standalone. You can connect them as layers that will work. So for example, I could choose this 2D realm light in the library, press Ctrl C to copy it, and then I can paste it here and I can connect it. So I'm just going to create a new layer by clicking on the checkered sphere, and then connecting the rim light. So you see already I have a rim light applied, and this is a 2D rim light. So it means wherever I place my camera, it's always going to point in the same direction, and I can change the direction here in my options. So pretty useful. You can change the range. Now, most of the features will work like this, but some of them, a few, basically the styles and the color adjustment, they act more like modifiers on existing features. And you can see that because they have a green input and a green output. So they are meant to be in between a layer and the line by shader. So let me demonstrate. I'm going to pick the painterly style here. So copy it, paste it here. I'm just going to drop it directly on the line in between the key light and the lighting by shader. So it's going to apply this sort of modifier on the alpha channel of the key light. And now if I go to this key light, it's been renamed to painterly style, and you see it's been nested underneath. So you can still play with the softness of your light and the range, but then you have some extra options. So you can change the repeat of your texture. You can change the softness to make it sharper. And you can even change the style. If you click on this here, you can change the style of the texture. And we include 4 types of brushstroke by default. But the cool thing is that this is UV based. So not only is this much faster than if it was procedural, but you can also easily just go inside, pressing tab, and use any texture of your choice as long as it's seamless. And you can apply it to your lights and any kind of features. You can apply it on the specular, on really anything. So it's pretty powerful. Now, there are a few minor issues with the shader that we couldn't fix, and it's because they are inherent to Blender. Mainly, it's some refreshing issues. I'm going to show you what this is. So it mostly involves the gradients and the virtual lights because they have some driven keys and connected things inside the node group. You see there are driven keys here, and sometimes Blender won't refresh by default. So let's say I pick this spherical gradient just to show you. I'm going to paste it here, create a new layer, connect the spherical gradient. So if I were to pick this spherical gradient here, it's located in line by shader gradients. So when you move it here, by default, you would expect it to light your objects. However, it doesn't work at first. So you just need to give Blender a little push to help him update. And the fastest way to do it is to grab the spherical gradient and just drag and drop it on the collection it was already in. And you see, just like that, it's going to update. And then you have your spherical gradient. So you can go on your material and you can change the color of the spherical gradient to maybe a nice orange color. And there you go. Now, one of our favorite features on this Line by Shader 2.0 is the transparency feature. And this is something that you guys have been requesting in the comments for a long time, how to achieve transparency with the shader. Well, you can now achieve full transparency with this new shader. I'm going to show you how. So I'm going to pick this alpha blend feature, copy it, and I'm going to paste it here. So this one is meant to be plugged into the transparency. So you see it's purple, it's meant to be here. So you plug it in, and then you need to do an extra step, which is to go in your material settings and change the blend mode to alpha blend. So one thing that can happen is when you do that, it's not going to respond. Again, this is a Blender problem, and this time there's no easy way to fix it. You really have to save your scene and reopen it to fix it. So I'm going to show you. Now it works, and if I plug it in, I change the transparency, now it's going to work. It's slightly annoying, but you know, it's just not something we can fix. Maybe Blender will fix it in a later patch. So you see when you play with the, now that I've plugged it in, I get some extra options with the transparency, shader opacity. Now it turns all black. It seems like it's not working, but this is because we have an outline underneath. Luckily, we're using a custom Solidify outline material, which also has a transparency input. So that means you can use the same alpha blend and place it in the transparency input of your Solidify, change the blend mode to alpha blend, and then you can change the opacity of just your outline. Now, here are some cool stuff you can do with that. You see, you have the shader opacity here, but there's also a thing called alpha mask. So let's say I unplug the spherical gradient, And you see this one has a gray output. This is the mask. So if I plug the, so if I change the, let's say I change the softness of this thing, I'm going to plug it in, the alpha mask, and then change the softness to 0.2. Now I'm going to pick it again, go to my solidify outline, and connect the mask into the alpha blend. Now I've got full transparency. I can show this thing. Oh, you see how it's not refreshing properly? So again, small thing to fix. You just drag and drop the spherical gradient on top. Gonna fix that. So yeah, full transparency of these things, including the outline. This is pretty amazing. And the cool thing is you can even go to your shadow settings. Let me show if I can show you. So shadow mode changes to, I'm not sure if you can see it. Okay, so shadow mode, alpha hashed. Change it on your outline 2. Shadow mode, alpha hashed. And then you go, there you go. You have full transparency on your shadows as well. And the last cool thing you can do, so you can be super creative with this. We're still ourselves discovering things we can do with the shader, even though we built it ourselves. So if you, let me show you. So you see this base color here, which is the gray color underneath. I showed you earlier that when you unplug it, it's going to be black. But when you put an alpha blend node inside of transparency, when you remove it, it's going to be fully transparent. Now, for this to work, you really have to deactivate the outline. But you see, now you have this layer floating in space. If the transparency doesn't seem to work properly, it's because it's using object locations to decide which one is in front of which. And I think this object's origin is underneath. So you just have to set the origin to geometry. And now when you move it over, it's going to appear on top. The only issue with when you do this is that the shadows, even in alpha hash, are not going to work properly. So you either have to leave them at alpha shadow mode opaque or just turn it off. But still can be pretty useful. I mean, you can, these are still editable, by the way. So if I change my light softness, it's literally a layer floating in space. So this was the quick overview of the features. Now I'm going to open a scene with some characters and show you what you can expect to be doing once you master the shader. All right, so I've opened up this scene with 2 characters. There's Ballista and a Triceratops from our project Dinomancers. I'm going to use them to demonstrate a couple more cool things you can do with the shader. One thing it does really well is light linking, something you cannot do in Blender usually. If you look at the light features here, there's a light set for characters, one for background and one for extra. Now you don't have to use them this way, but if you do decide to only use these nodes for characters and these for backgrounds, here's the kind of thing you can do. You can have the character light be more from an exaggerated frontal angle, giving you these very pleasing shadows, but then have the ground cast shadows from the top, so you have total control over how things look. What else? You can do very easy anisotropic specular. So let me just turn off the boulder here, and I'm going to rotate the light in the back so you see better. So you see this anisotropic specular here. This was done using an anisotropic style. I just drag and drop onto a specular, and then I get all these extra options. I can play with the thickness, I can play how much it deforms, and I can add these stripes to fade it in and out. So really easy. You just have to do a little bit of setup using EEVEEs, but nothing complex. You can also have occlusion in your scene, either real time using EEVEE. These shadows you see, like these soft shadows you see in the center here, are being masked out by the shadow of the light, but these are generated by EEVEE. But then you can also mix it with baked occlusion that you did in cycles. For example, on this dinosaur, I have baked occlusion, and by default, it would look something like this, like super soft in 3D. But using this baked occlusion feature, you can really sharpen it and get a more cel-shaded look that will blend really easy with your lights. And you can paint light and shadows really easily too. So if I zoom in on the face of Ballista here, you see these nice shadows here. Most of them are painted actually. Let me show you. So you see I have my key light, and into opacity I have plugged in an image texture. So black and white texture. If I unplug it, you'll see how it looks usually. So with it, much better. And this was painted directly in Blender, which is something I love because sometimes in Photoshop you just don't really see what you're doing. So change this to texture paint, press N, and then in the tools panel you select your material, your texture, and then you can start painting your light and restraining it however you want. So it's really useful. Now it only scratches the surface of what you can do. It doesn't limit itself to characters. You can also do backgrounds and special effects. In fact, the whole animated shot we showed you earlier was done using this Toon shader. In January, we want to do a tutorial that's focused on tips and tricks on how to set up a full character using this Toon shader. But we also have a lot of other things in mind. We want to do facial rig and show you animation tricks. So even if you don't buy the shader, we still got you covered. However, if you did buy your shader, thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and we cannot wait to do more tutorials for you. Don't forget to check the user guide, but if you have any questions, we'll be here in the comments, and we'll see you next year. Take care.